This week on Inside the Headset, we are featuring Ed Raby, the head coach at SUNY Morrisville. In this podcast, Coach Raby shares the value of coaching many positions, coaching through the COVID-19 pandemic, and his experience with the AFCA 35 under 35 program. If you like this podcast, be sure to follow us wherever you get your podcasts, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel to watch new episodes each week. Now, let's get inside the headset with Coach Raby.
Coach, what's going on, man? How are you?
I'm doing good, man. How about yourself?
I'm doing excellent, man. I appreciate you making 30 minutes for myself and the AFCA podcast. We definitely know how valuable that time is whenever you're a head ball coach. And once again, I appreciate you. So let's dive into this thing, man. The easy question I always ask and I always get the ball rolling on these podcasts is, what made you decide to be a ball coach? When did you know you wanted to go down this avenue?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's a particular time that I said to myself, I'm going to be a coach.
Yeah.
I admired my high school coach. I had several good high school coaches that I admired. But honestly, when I was in college, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And as I got closer to graduation, and just thinking about what I wanted to do, I honestly was one of those guys that was clueless about what I was going to do. So at one point, I had a conversation with my college head coach, Coach Cole, who had mentioned, hey, you might be a good coach. You should try it out, and I got involved a little bit in the spring of my senior year after I was done helping out the new head coach at the time at Alma, Coach Piscana, and figured I'd give it a try. So that's kind of how it happened. It wasn't a epiphany or anything like that. I always thought that if I got into it and didn't like it, I could get out. But, everyone I had talked to said, hey, if you want to try it now. Try it before you get into the workforce. Otherwise, you're never going to go back. Yeah. So once we got going, I love every minute of it and haven't left since.
Addicted once you started. Yeah, that's interesting, man. I've been recording a lot of these podcasts here recently, and this kind of topic came up, and it's just interesting. And my story's probably relatively similar. I did have an older brother who was coaching at the time. I kind of knew maybe that was something I wanted to do, but it was more that absolutely just weird period for a college football player when he's done playing. NFL is probably out of reach. Playing some of the AFL and IFL stuff is probably not in the cards, and you're just literally sitting in your apartment or whatever in that situation. And you're like, man, what am I about to do? And it really is just kind of a unique time period. And so that period for you gave coaching a shot, and
absolutely.
You ended up getting your first gig relatively quickly. Did you do much coaching at Alma, or was Alfred University your first opportunity?
Yeah, Alma, I did basically just a little bit of the spring. In fact, I actually went to the AFCA Future Football Coaches Academy.
Oh, wow.
Back in 2012, right after I got done playing. And that's kind of my first start. I started thinking about coaching. And then as far as the Alfred gig, I didn't know anybody there. I just had been applying to every job that I could possibly apply to. Coach Rankle, who was the offensive coordinator at the time, he's now the head coach there, gave me a call and said, hey, you want to do an interview? I didn't own a car, so I had my mom drive me out to New York.
Wow.
And she stayed in a hotel with me, and I went and interviewed, and they offered me the job, and I took it and just kind of took a chance. That was kind of how I got it. So didn't know anybody, just kind of random call, and it ended up being a great experience. I had a great experience at Alfred and learned a lot.
How about that? That's crazy, man. Just a lot of people's getting that first gig is just typically so difficult. It can take some time, take some years, and Mama geared up the vehicle and took you over there.
Yeah, that's how my mom is. She'll do anything for me.
Man, that's amazing, man. That's a great story. An interesting thing, you mentioned Future Coach Academy. So I was a part of that class. If it was the one in Nashville, right? Was that one in Nashville?
Yep.
Yeah. So I was actually a part of that class. So I probably met you then, not knowing that.
Yeah, I know.
We'd be
not a lot of guys that were in that class. It's hard to keep track of it. But.
Yeah. No doubt about it, man. That's pretty awesome. So one of the things I thought that was interesting about your stop at Alfred, there was a couple of things, but one of the things I thought was interesting was, you were able to kind of get your degree while you were there, your master's degree, and it was an MBA. And I'm not trying to generalize what coaches do in terms of that their master programs, but typically when you're a graduate assistant, especially at the lower level where you do wear so many hats and you got so many different jobs and things to do, typically you try to find something, master's in basket weaving. You know, that's a joke. But you know, just you're trying to find something a little bit easier so you can spend your time.
Right.
Just, you know, staying busy with the football stuff. But you go get an MBA. And so I just thought that was super interesting because you rarely kind of see that from a graduate assistant. Why did you choose to go that route? Were you still up in the air about what you wanted to do?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it was, you know, just I wasn't 100% sure that I was going to coach forever. And I also knew, just talking to some friends of mine at the time through my coaching staff at Alma, you know, coaching for a lot of coaches does not last forever. So I was very committed to, I wanted to do something. I had a business degree from Alma, so it made sense to do an MBA. And I've always been intrigued in terms of business, of the leadership aspect of it. And that's kind of part of coaching as well. So for me, it was just kind of giving me that plan B. You know, like some guys will do teaching to that plan B. But for me, it was, I wanted to be able to, if football didn't work out, you know, be able to go into the business world and kind of move my way up that way. Because I've always been kind of a competitor, and business is a very competitive field. So that was the thinking. It wasn't, I didn't want to do something I wasn't going to potentially use. And I think the degree has helped me a ton, even as a coach. So it kind of worked out pretty well for me.
Well, that's a question I get often. You know, just kind of sitting in this role, and coaches hit me up for advice, and they start talking about that secondary degree. And, you know, I have my opinion, not my opinion, but, you know, I have my experience that I'm able to draw back on. I got a master's as well, and I, you know, was able to leverage that into some more money in certain high school jobs. And, you know, obviously you can go out in California and actually be a professor while you coach, yada, yada, yada.
Right.
But from your point of view, you've been able to use in the profession, enlighten us, man, and so enlighten myself so I can share that information and people listen to podcasts.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, business is obviously a lot like coaching in the sense that it's a very broad field.
Yeah.
I mean, there's marketing, there's the financial side, there's the operational side, which if you look at a football operation, and you can kind of hear some head coaches talk about it, it's not just coaching. You know, to operate a football program, whether you're the head coach or an assistant coach, you need to be able to do a lot of different things that are not even football related.
Right.
So as a head coach, you know, budgeting for me is a little bit simpler than maybe somebody that doesn't have experience with that.
Yeah.
You know, or even just, you know, how do you handle different position groups and operations and schedules and all this different stuff and player management? That's stuff that you do in business.
Yeah.
So it kind of crosses over a lot. And then you get into the college side, which the institution has, is college is a business too, you know, recruiting, sales, admissions, all that kind of stuff. So it really just, the broadness of business allows you to kind of get a little bit of everything, which in coaching, you kind of, as you said, it's like you're a counselor, you're a salesperson, you're an operations guy, you're a coach, you're a teacher.
Yeah.
You have to have a broad range of skills. I think business does that for you.
No doubt about it. So while you were there at Alfred, you're working on this MBA, which I'm sure is rigorous in its own right, just from an academic standpoint. You know, you're working, you know, at the defensive line, tight ends, junior varsity offensive coordinator. You know, what were some of those hats that you wore, you know, besides the X and O stuff, you know, outside the building? What were some of your responsibilities, you know, just being at one of those smaller universities?
Yeah, I mean, the staff at Alfred, it was, with our GA position, was a little bit, they gave us a lot more in the program. You know, a lot of GAs can't do as much recruiting.
Yeah.
You know, but for us, it was, you're doing the academic study halls, right? You're doing, you're helping out with the community service projects. You're helping out with equipment. And what I liked about Alfred was them giving us an opportunity to coach on both sides of the ball.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't know if that's how it is there now, but typically what they were doing when I was there is you coach a year on defense and coach a year on offense. And I thought that was a tremendous experience for me, especially being a defensive player, coaching defense my first year, not really having any offensive knowledge. That year on offense has helped me a lot. So it was just a great experience. It gave us anything. I mean, every day you had to come in and be ready to do anything, to be random. So it was just a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. And so that was the head coach's philosophy at the time, was basically a GA came in for his 2-year stint. It was one side on one year.
That's what it seemed like. Yeah. Coach Murray never really expressed whether that was his philosophy, but it just seemed like that was a really important thing for the GAs, I guess, that you get exposed to different positions, that you're not just pigeonholed.
I'll tell you what, man, I've heard a lot of things on a podcast. We're 300 some episodes into this deal, and man, I've never heard that, and it's almost like, why isn't everybody doing that? Just to get that exposure.
Right.
It's so easy in this profession, and you probably can't relate to this with all the positions that you coach over time, but it's so easy to be a running backs guy. You play running back in college, and you just end up being a running back guy. Maybe every now and again you pop in a receiver room, but being able to get that versatile experience probably helps in the long run. And that's probably a good segue to our next question here. You coach D-line, you coach tight ends, you were the JV offensive coordinator at Alfred, you coach D-line at your next job, linebackers, O-line recruiting coordinator, special teams. What has that just plethora of experience done for you? We're going to keep this thing chronological, but let's fast forward to you right now. What has just been able to have that experience at all those positions been able to do for you in your career?
Oh, it helps a ton, and I think that's not you don't see it in the bio as much, but the COVID year when we only had 2 coaches, we only had 4 for the spring. I was coaching O-line and the defensive coordinator. So I think what it does, and for me, when I got into coaching and I finally realized I wanted to do it for a living, I knew I wanted to be a head coach at some point. I didn't know how long it would take, but so I was very intentional. When the linebacker position at Allegheny came open, I went and asked the head coach, hey, can I be the linebackers coach? Because I wanted to learn about coverages, right? And then we had our O-line position open, and I took a risk. I said, hey, I want to be full-time. Can I work at the O-line position with Coach Hammer at the time? And just put myself out there in terms of asking for those responsibilities, special teams coordinator. I wanted to learn as much as possible so that when I did get my opportunity, I felt like I had a broader understanding of the team aspect of football. Football is so siloed in some respects, as you talked about. Like you got your positions, and your position groups are really tight with the position coach, and every position has different personalities.
Yeah.
So I think that knowing how that works together and kind of being able to be exposed to both offense and defense helps you as a coach. Okay, what works on offense? What works on defense? How do we attack different things? And so I think that it helped me a ton get to where I am today. Having that broad experience gave me a chance, an opportunity when an opportunity came available.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm happy you said that. I didn't have that as a question to ask you, but that's good you mentioned that. That's how you went through, multiple positions, was by just straight up asking. Because I probably assumed, and wrong for me assuming that, coach was just like, hey, the linebacker's job is open. I want you to move over here so we can hire this guy, or whatever. But you were literally going into his office and seeking these new opportunities. Now I got to ask you this. When you start kind of hitting in uncharted waters, and teaching is teaching. I'm not going to try to make this harder than what it is, and but sometimes having that experience playing a position or just being around a position very long, all of a sudden you start talking about hopping on the other side of the ball, coaching offensive line, which takes a lot of skill, and be brutally honest. I mean, that's where you're winning and losing games. Where do you kind of get the confidence to say, hey, man, I want to try this, in the most important position group on the field?
Right. Yeah, I think that part of the confidence is we don't ever go into anything ready for it. I mean,
absolutely. That's true.
Say, are you ready to be a coordinator? Are you ready to be a head coach? No, you're not. No one is.
Yeah.
So what I always used to do was, I loved football. So I was always watching. When I went to convention, I wasn't going to the D-line stuff. I was going to offense, defense, different positions so that I could learn. And then what I always have told our coaches and how I've approached interviews is, if you don't know something, you express to the coach, I may not know something, but I'm going to do the work to find out.
Yeah.
And I think that's the key. So whenever I was in those interviews for those positions, once I kind of asked about it, it was, if they asked a question I didn't know, I'd say, well, I don't know that now, but I guarantee I'm going to find out. And people, learn from people. So I think just being willing to be proactive is, you don't have 100% confidence. You have confidence that you can go find the answer and learn. And I was actually I can remember a conversation with Coach Rankle at Alfred when I asked about the O-line transfer, going over to O-line. And he made a comment to me. He goes, Ed, you're more prepared to do that than I was when I went to O-line, because he had gone from D-line to O-line. So I think that gave me some confidence too, just like, hey, okay, I think I can take this on. And so it's just being confident in your ability to learn.
Absolutely. And I think coaches typically don't struggle to find confidence, just
Right.
a little bit
That's
probably encoding our DNA to a certain extent. And so I'm sure, kind of like you did, you were ready to approach anything and knew you'll be able to find the answer out. But one thing that we typically don't share, especially as we get further and further in our careers, we typically don't like to share our struggles. And, I would love for you to, if possible, in any of these stops, which one of those ones was kind of like, man, it's a lot to this position. It's, not that you're swimming. It doesn't have to be a negative deal, but, just something that was a true challenge for you to learn and coach.
Yeah. Well, I think they're all a challenge in their own right. I think the hardest one for me would be the transformation to be a coordinator. Because, Coach Fitz gave me an opportunity. I was 27 years old, and everyone that thinks they're ready for that step.
Yeah.
You think you know everything about defense. And the first year didn't go very well for me as far as statistically. We had made some improvements as a team, but overall statistically, defensively, we didn't do so well. And I realized after the end of the season, like, wow, this is a lot more than just knowing how to draw something on a board.
Yeah.
And I think that's always been a struggle for all of I think every coach goes through that. Like, a lot of coaches can draw something on a board, but coaching is really about teaching and learning how to teach your coaches as a coordinator so that they know how to teach it the way you want it and all those different dynamics. I think that was one of the biggest challenges I've gone through in my career.
Yeah. And so that was at your first year at Morrisville?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's your first year at Morrisville. You kind of have a super interesting run there. You guys do well. You end up with the opportunity in 20 to take over as the interim. And once again, this 2020 time frame, because I've referenced this on a few podcasts here over the last few weeks. This 2025 time frame always comes up, and everybody's story is just a little crazy. Whether it's a spring season or the coach himself catching COVID. What was it like to not just have to endure this very, very, very interesting deal that pandemic that we had to all go through, but also have this opportunity to now run this program right in the midst of just this chaos?
Yeah, well, everyone's story is different, like you said. I think what people don't realize about my first year was it was already chaos before COVID. Okay. From the standpoint of, I think I was 29 or 30 at the time, I think 30 years old. You're not expecting to be a head coach. Our head coach says, hey, I'm taking another job.
Yeah. And
this was in February. Right. So this is like after we go on the road, recruiting, all this stuff. And basically I get the opportunity. I'm very grateful for that to take over as the intern in February. Well, there's some coach transitioning there because some of the, we had some coaches going to Cortland with him. And so you're losing some coaches and then COVID hits, so the biggest challenge, it was already chaotic and then COVID hit. You can't see the players. The way our school kind of handled it. New York was a very strict state.
Yeah.
So, they're not coming back to school. You can't see them. And the one positive was I already knew the players. I guess that was the one good positive. But then you only have one other coach on staff. It was me and the offensive coordinator that I hired, Matt Rogers. We were it, because they did all the lower end coaches that kind of didn't recontract and everything. So not only do head coach and figuring it out, and then you have restrictions as you come into the next fall. But we only had two coaches, right? So we're recruiting with two coaches. We have all these rules we have to follow with two coaches. So that I'm very proud of what we've been able to do since that situation because Matt and I, we always talk about how crazy it is that we were doing it by ourselves with 120 players, and we've just made progress each step of the way. So I think going through that in some ways was hard, but at the same time, I think what it taught us was how to be efficient. We were able to learn some valuable things about if you recruit more one-on-one, how that can impact your program.
Yeah.
So we learned a lot of things and we weren't negative about it. And I think that's what got us through it.
Yeah, well, you made mention of something earlier, which is just so true. I probably not the first time anybody's ever heard it, but I mean, it's just it just needs to be said over and over again is like, man, you think you're ready to be a coordinator, you're not. You think you're ready to be a head coach, and you're not. And you're certainly not when all of a sudden it's like, hey, surprise, you're the head coach, you know. And
right.
that's kind
No,
of how it turned for you at that point in time. And then all of a sudden you're dealing with all this stuff. Did that slowdown of COVID? You know, obviously not having players on campus, not been able to hire anybody, you know, until afterwards. Did any of that play in your favor in regards to kind of just being able to digest being a head coach? Because oftentimes, if that didn't happen, you got thrown into it, you know?
Yeah, I think in some ways, I think the best part about it was recruiting. Because even though we were worried about recruiting, that class has ended up being pretty good because it was all one-on-one.
Yeah.
You know, so you're able to sit down with parents, you're able to, you know, at the Division III level, you're recruiting a lot of guys.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
You don't typically get that chance to sit down with every family.
Right.
So that was a positive. I don't know if it necessarily helped me grow as much in terms of the on-field stuff, because basically my first year of actual being the head coach and making those decisions during the game was 2021.
Yeah.
So it kind of delayed that in some sense.
Yeah.
But it definitely learned a lot about and helped us with recruiting. I think that we always talk about how it helped change our view of recruiting and how important the relation. If you can force yourself as a Division III coach to be more relationship oriented,
yeah,
in that when you're recruiting all those guys, you can have an advantage with that.
Yeah, and you know, I definitely want to make this a COVID podcast or anything like that. But you just brought up a really good point there, and you know, around the office, and you know, talking to a few other coaches, I felt like a lot of coaches all kind of, you know, it maybe wasn't that recruiting thing exactly, but it was some kind of, hey, I just realized we can use Zoom a little bit better to be able to talk to our kids, or, you know, our strength and conditioning is doing something a little different because we found this out during COVID. So I think some people found that, and, you know, oftentimes I ask the question, you know, have you retained it? Are you still kind of using that mentality? So, or did you carry this along with you? Is this the way you're approaching recruiting now?
I mean, we obviously can't carry it around perfectly.
Yeah.
But one of the things that we started to do was, hey, okay, as you recruit your area, contact parents more often.
Yeah.
You know, get talk to parents more often. When we have visits, we want to make sure that we're sitting down one-on-one with families,
right,
not just the head coach, but other coaches. So we've emphasized that in our recruiting. I think it's definitely helped our recruiting one thing.
Yeah, no doubt. I've spent about a year at the at the Division III level, and then did FCS non-scholarship, which is very similar to D3.
Yeah, similar, very similar.
You know, when you're throwing that just gigantic net, it is harder. It's way harder to kind of get that personal relationship and all that stuff, because it's just it's just so fast paced and so many kids that you got to deal with. So putting that personalization and that relationship feel on it has been very beneficial for you guys. Now, I do want to ask you, you know, you finally got on the field in 21, and then we just obviously finished up the 22 season, and looking at this 23 season now. What was your biggest improvement, just personally, when you look in the mirror and you look at what you've done organizationally, you know, football X and O wise, regardless of what it is? What do you look back and say, man, this was my big improvement from year 1 to year 2?
Well, I think of what I would say the biggest one is, because there's been a lot. I mean, I think what I did the first year, I did two things pretty poorly. Number one, I changed some things that didn't need to be changed, you know, because, you know, for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Remember, the second thing was trying to be, you know, Coach Fitch is a great coach. He built a great foundation here. And you always felt like you had to honor that the way that he was,
right,
you know. Well, after the first year, I think the three things that we did was, one, I made a decision to be myself, you know, more of myself, and not try to do something. I also had the staff, we sat and met and we talked for a couple hours about, we have got to focus on the details more, you know, the little things, the fundamentals, all the stuff that actually matters instead of the pie in the sky stuff. Right. And I think that was the mistake that I made. So that really helped us the second year. I mean, we simplified everything, simplified our processes. I started focusing on being who I was and running the program from the way that I thought it should be run, learning from all the head coaches I worked under. And I think that really helped us. And we told our players to recommit to the process. That was basically what we did, is we're going to recommit to everything that the foundation that we built with Coach Fitz. And everyone got on board with that. The coaches got on board, and we were fanatical with our effort of getting better every day. And I think that's what led to the turnaround, as some people will say, well, it was a turnaround.
Yeah.
I thought we were close in our 2-8 year. We were still a talented team. We didn't have we had a lot of areas we weren't perfect on in terms of the details. And then once we recommitted to those details and our coaching staff decided to be themselves and not try to uphold a certain way of doing things, that's what helped us kind of turn it around.
Yeah. And so I'll be curious to ask, especially when you have to kind of look in the mirror and be honest with yourself. I'm sure, you said you felt close in that 2-8 season, but when you look at the win-loss column, it's still 2-8, right?
It's 2-8.
Yeah, it's 2-8, and you kind of look in the mirror. What was that process like? Not necessarily, what the improvement was, but actually finding it and looking in the mirror and saying, okay, Coach, you weren't being yourself. Because that's a real conversation. That's a tough conversation, kind of internally. How did you come about that and when?
Yeah, it's really it's really tough. I read the book Extreme Ownership.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you've heard of the book.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it really made me open my eyes. Like, okay, stop blaming the outside stuff, right? Look at yourself. Are you being a great leader? And once I said, okay, well, I've got to make sure that I'm doing my part, communicating better, setting standards and holding those standards. A lot of football coaches, and I've seen this throughout my career, will say a certain standard they have, but then they don't back it up.
Yeah.
So what was really important to me is whatever standards we set, we have to back it up. And in some ways, that's why you shouldn't have 20 of them, right? You should have a small list of things that you value and uphold those. So if somebody, for us, like if somebody's late to something, we send them home, and that is hard for coaches to do. Like if a talented player walks in late, a lot of coaches want to just let that guy stay, and we made the decision that doesn't matter who it is, we're going to uphold that standard. So being on time is one of the ones that we have. Like that's like there's no excuses on being on time unless you communicate, right, which is what you're going to have to do in the real world.
Absolutely.
So I think just examining myself as a leader and making sure I'm direct with the coaches on what I want, right, I really helped us get better overall. But yeah, it's a hard conversation to put the blame on yourself.
Right.
The reason we were 2-8 was because of my leadership.
Yeah.
Not because of anything.
And you mentioned reading that book. Well, at what point did you read that? Is this something that you read a long time ago, or was this kind of in our postseason that you decided to crack that open?
It was kind of during postseason. I'm a big reader, so I had a buddy of mine who works who I played college football with, say, hey, you need to read this book. And he works in insurance, and he's a manager. And so I read it, and I was like, this guy's making a lot of great points about making no excuses, essentially.
Yeah.
And you always talk about that, but a lot of people,
oh yeah, it's easy to say.
Yeah. It's very easy to say, but it's hard to execute.
Absolutely.
And I think that I'm actually rereading it right now. I read a chapter every day, and so I try to reread it every summer now that I did it a few summers ago, and it really just helped me change the mindset. Like, I'm going to take responsibility for our performance. And then that's kind of the way that I kind of look at it now. Is it's my job to make sure that we perform at a high level, both off the field and on the field.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's it's something I see in the profession. If it was anything negative, I'd say about just about our very particular coaching profession. There's definitely rules and stuff that I could complain about, but I just, even myself, just been in certain spots. It's like, oh man, this school costs $70K. It's hard to get kids
right
here. Oh man, we got an old locker room. It's hard to be good here. How many times have you heard that just through the profession, guys?
All the time.
And you want to put all this external blame on a lot of things. It's just, I felt like I became a better coach. I didn't read the book at the time or anything like that, but I just like, man, I'm going to shut up with the complaining. We're going to be good or bad. My position group's going to be good or bad. My special team is going to be good or bad.
Correct.
100% because of what the effort I put into it. And that's a good point. I'm happy you kind of hit that, man, because that's something I said I hadn't read the book, but I do have that kind of mentality as well. Now, one of the things I meant to ask, but it kind of ties into my last question here for you is you mentioned going through that COVID year with just you two guys, and then clearly you got out of that and you were able to go and hire again.
Yep.
And anytime you're at the Division III level, you're seeing guys go take other jobs, go make more money, go take a higher job, or decide they want to be out of the profession, whatever it is. So the hiring process, I'm sure, is not anything new to you. But
right.
Once again, you're going to do things your way. You've really put your stamp and your brand on your program. What's your stamp and brand when you're looking for a coach? What are you looking for?
Yeah. So I think for me, I want a coach. I want different personalities on the staff, but I want them at the core to care about the players. That's to me always been. And again, that's something that a lot of coaches say, but are you working on that every day of actually caring about the players? And every coach can't care about every player. That's why position coaches are important, right? Being a head coach is much harder, I've found, to have a deep relationship with every player.
Yeah.
So it's important that your staff has coaches that want to develop lifelong relationships with their position, the players in their position. So that's the first thing I look for. I want to get a guy that works hard, that's not afraid of work. I think everybody says that, and you sort of try to reach out to people on the reference list and kind of say, okay, is this guy going to work hard?
Yeah.
Because the other stuff, like, we're going to coach you on what our offense is, what our defense, what our special teams. I'm more interested in, do you care about helping players, and are you going to work hard? And if you do those two things, then that's a coach that I'm going to hire. You can't be too picky at the level where you're getting younger coaches. You got to be able to teach the coaches. So it's more about those two aspects, and then you can work with that.
Yeah, and what can a coach expect in terms of an interview with your program? Like, what does it look like? Are you flying guys out? Are you doing it on Zoom? What does it look like for you?
Yeah, it depends on the position. Like, if you have, we found in recent years that Zoom has really helped us with the lower end positions in terms of the entry level.
Yeah.
Like the intern level, because you can get guys from all over the country, and our school is not going to fork out money for all these guys.
Flying,
so Zoom allows us to kind of narrow down, who it is that's really interested, and then we try to get them on campus. If it's a position that's full time where you're in the office 12 months, we're going to do on campus interviews, and it's usually a whole day. And we kind of, I heard you talk to Blaze a few weeks ago. It was funny because he was talking about having them interact with different parts of campus and not just talking football.
Yeah.
Well, we do this. We do the same thing. We want guys to take a tour. We want guys to talk to, admissions if we can, and have lunch with players, those type of things, and then we will talk some football.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a mix. I like doing that so that you kind of can see if they can interact with people outside of just coaches, because coaches are different. A lot of coaches can talk to coaches. Can you talk to people that aren't coaches?
No doubt about it.
The big thing I like to look for.
Yeah. Now, I asked you this question, and if you don't have an answer, it's totally fine. But if there was anything in that interview process that you would be like, man, I bet this is pretty unique. I bet I'm one of the only guys that do that. And then and also, if you don't want to share what that is, that's fine too. But do you feel like you do anything like that?
I don't know if I can't say I can think of one off the top of my head.
I got you. Okay.
I think what a question, I'll again give somebody else some props, but a question that was asked by Coach Fitz when I was interviewing here, and I've always used the question now, is, what does it feel to be coached by you? What does it feel like to be coached by you? I always thought that was an interesting question, and I've used it ever since. I stole it from him. Because I'd never been asked that before.
No.
And never really to think like, okay, what does it feel like to be coached by me?
Well, what is
that?
Sorry, go ahead. Finish.
Yeah, that's kind of I wouldn't say that's unique, because again, Coach Fitz did it, but that's a question that you don't get a lot that we use on an interview.
Absolutely, yeah. And you said that to me, and I'm sitting here like, dang, how would I answer it? What's as you asked that question over the last couple of years, what is the answer that you've heard and it's been like, oh wow, yeah, that's who I want.
Yeah, I think what you want, a type of answer that I'm looking for, is somebody that's going to hold kids accountable, but also have great relationships.
Yeah.
And again, that's, some people view that as a hard thing as a gray line, but I think kids want to be held accountable.
Oh, absolutely.
And so I'm looking for somebody that's going to have a standard, that's going to treat it as be an authority figure in the sense that I'm here to guide these players, but also have a relationship to the point where the players don't fear them, because fear cannot be the primary motivator in any situation. Mm-hmm. So I think that's what you're kind of looking for with the answer.
Yeah, there you go, Coach. Well, I appreciate that, man. Before I let you go here, I just want to visit with you. You mentioned being a part of that Future Coaches Academy class back in 2012, but now this past year you were part of our AFCA 35 under 35 Leadership Institute. What was it like to be a part of that program? Why should guys apply?
Yeah, I thought it was a great experience for me. Especially being one of the only Division III coaches, I thought that was just like, being around a bunch of guys that are coaching at the higher level and just kind of seeing what they go through. I remember having, the education on the finances and the agents and the search processes was so different than anything else I've done. Yeah. Because a lot of places will teach you football, but this was more of a, how do you establish yourself? How do you manage your career? How do you grow in your career? And I thought Glenn Caruso was a tremendous speaker in terms of identifying, hey, you have to make a list of priorities for yourself. So for me, it was a great experience meeting guys, and I will always look back on that day and say, well, I think that's going to be a pivot point for me as getting better as a coach. So, and I'm looking forward to being involved in the future, just kind of going and talking to the new classes and everything like that.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I look forward to for you to drop some knowledge on those guys as we move forward. And I do have one more question, as I will feel bad about saying it, because anytime anybody talks about their first time at the AFCA convention, I typically like to ask that question. And you mentioned it way earlier in the podcast that spring in Alma, you went over to that first AFCA convention. Sitting here in the big chair, less than a decade. Yeah,
we're about 10 years.
Yeah, we're 10 years out. I mean, 10 years out. And you're at that first convention, and it's thousands of coaches.
I know.
Guys just seen on TV. Would you have ever guessed it? Would you ever guess you'd be sitting in the big chair?
I probably would have thought it could have happened, but certainly I'm a head coach way faster than I ever anticipated.
Yeah.
I'm very lucky, it's being at the right place at the right time. Coach Fitz is still here, and I'm still a coordinator. And so, like, I look back on that first convention, I was like wide-eyed, deer in the headlights, like I had no clue what the profession was about. And you're just seeing everybody kind of walking around. It was a crazy experience. And I was just trying to get a job, right. Just try, can I do this? And my goal has always been to make a living coaching. Yeah. I never really have thought about, what level or any of that. I just wanted to be able to make a living once I got into it. So the fact that I'm able to make a living coaching football and helping young people grow is always, like, I always have to think. I mean, I'm sitting here, I have a polo and shorts on. I mean, like, I'm having a blast.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm very grateful of where the career has taken me. And, it's crazy to think that I still have, quite a time till I can retire. So I'm looking forward to the next however many decades it is I'm coaching.
That's awesome, Coach. That's a great place to kind of end the podcast, man. Hey, I appreciate you, what you do for the AFCA, and then also what you do for your young people over there. Keep fighting a good fight, and look forward to seeing you in Nashville in 24, okay?
Awesome, son. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Coach. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Inside the Headset. If you heard anything on this episode that you would like to learn more information about, head over to afcapodcast.com, where you can find every episode and all of the corresponding show notes. While you're there, take a second to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions for the show, please let us know by sending an email to podcast@afca.com. Make sure to follow the podcast on Twitter at Inside the Headset and tag it when you share each episode. You can stay up to date with all things AFCA by following the @WeAreAFCA Twitter account. Every episode of Inside the Headset can also be found on your favorite audio streaming platforms such as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. If you are not currently a member of the AFCA, be sure to find us online at afca.com and apply to join over 10,000 NFL, college, and high school coaches from around the country who are striving to be the best they can be. With an AFCA membership, you gain invaluable access to the annual AFCA convention, the bi-monthly magazine, and the new and improved digital library, which contains thousands of videos and articles contributed by hundreds of current and former football coaches. You can also visit AFCAinsider.com to sign up for our free weekly email newsletter on the right-hand side of the screen. It comes out every Tuesday at lunch and is filled with great articles and stories written by many of the same coaches you hear on the podcast. It's geared to help you become a better coach tomorrow than you are today. Be sure to connect with me on Twitter at Coach Mario Price, and remember, the AFCA is not just an annual convention. It is an association that continually promotes education, guidance, and networking. But it is also so much more than that. The AFCA is about celebrating the past and educating the future. It is about developing great coaches who will produce great teams and even better people. So invest in your skill set and impact today by engaging with the AFCA.